How do you deal with strength loss on a cut? First, understand that if you just finish an aggressive bulk, you can likely lose 10 pounds or more of straight body fat fairly quickly, say in the first month or two, without experiencing much of a performance drop-off. The majority of your lifts can stay just as high. Sometimes, you might even get slightly stronger in the beginning before hitting a maintenance strength phase. That maintenance can last a while, depending on how high your starting body fat percentage was. Like if you were bear mode or above 20% body fat, you're in a great position to stay strong. However, as the cut approaches its midpoint, and especially as you get closer to the end, you'll start to see inevitable strength loss. I call this phase -1s. You might have been benching 225 for 10 reps consistently for the last 2.5 months, and then at the start of month 3, you suddenly get 9 reps. You hold on to that for a few weeks, then drop to 8, then 7, 6, 5, and eventually 4. In the worst case scenario, this can happen every workout, but realistically, it's every 2 to 3 workouts. At that point, you probably have to drop the weight down to 205, and then strength tends to stabilize again until you hit another weight loss milestone. That process will then repeat itself. Maybe you'll finish your cut with a 185 bench if you went from bare mode to shredded, straight up. So to put this into numbers, when I go from 20% body fat down to 15%, there's usually minimal strength loss. That means dropping from 190 to 175, which is the perfect zone for being strong all around. But when I cut to 165, all of a sudden, I lose about 10% of strength. And then going from 165 to 155, that might be a 15% drop, since now I'm shredded. So the deeper you go, the worse it tends to scale. So the amount of strength loss you experience depends on your final destination. As a general rule, if you're already decently lean, maybe with a 32 to 34 inch waist, assuming it's not naturally small, or max 15% body fat, every 10 pounds of fat loss typically results in about a 10% strength loss on certain movements. This happens for a few key reasons, which I'll explain all in complete detail. To start, a prolonged calorie deficit is inherently catabolic. You're just not in the right environment to build muscle. Yes, you can build muscle and burn fat simultaneously, but it's not as good as pure maintenance and especially a very minor surplus. So even if your protein is high and you're maintaining a positive nitrogen balance, a deficit is still a deficit. It kills your work capacity and your muscular fullness, leading to that flat, depleted look, especially if your net carbs are dropping. And that can happen unintentionally just from eating fewer calories overall. Less food means less net carbs, so less glycogen stored into your muscles. And then going along with that, this idea of fullness is your changes in leverages, which is probably the #1 reason why you'll get weaker, in addition to the body fat itself. See, most lifters just aren't that good at cutting, especially early on. They tend to go in way too hard at the start without tracking meticulously. So during your first few cuts, you're probably not going to maintain as much muscle as you could have. This is just due to inexperience. I made the same mistake, and I did my best. That's why seasoned natural bodybuilders typically come into shows about 2 pounds heavier than their previous competition. Not necessarily because they gain a ton more muscle, but because they figured out how to hold on to it better on the way down. That's also why they stay away from aggressive bulks, because longer cuts almost always lead to more muscle loss. So if they are at a bulk and cut, it's within a 15-pound window. Certainly not going aggressive. And by the way, studies on natural bodybuilders always show muscle loss as they get close to a competition body fat, even with the perfect diet, training, and coaching. So don't think you're going to get shredded without losing strength. It's not happening. Too low of a body fat percentage is the #1 killer of strength. When you get exotically lean, your hormones crash, your energy tanks, your NEAT drops. You've got less food in you, and your leverages are not favorable. This is a concoction for losing gains. Because of all this, you can't expect to maintain all your strength, especially on lifts that are leverage dependent. This mainly includes variations of the bench press and barbell back squat. Meanwhile, your deadlift will barely budge. In fact, you might even get stronger for a while just because there's no big gut in the way. But for squats, that same gut acts like a spring, helping you pop out of the hole. And being heavier gives you more stability. Maybe that's why squats and milk tend to go so well together, right? Same deal for the bench press. You get what Bald Omni-Man calls the crash pad effect. That added body fat gives you an extra inch between your forearms and biceps in the bottom. So now you basically got a built-in JM press effect. Natural elbow wraps. That extra squishiness adds pop, and the thicker torso from both the chest and the back shortens the range of motion. So what used to feel like full ROM now feels more like a board press. Realistically, if you gain 20 pounds of fat and keep training the bench the same way, you'll probably hit some crazy PRs. That's why losing bench strength on a cut isn't such a big deal. It's often the first lift to come back once you regain even a little bit of fat. Now, if you stay lean, that recovery takes longer. So yes, there's always a temptation to bulk just to bring back up your bench. It's always there. If you're plateaued, you know you can pull that card. Heavier lifters naturally bench more, which is why big numbers at lighter body weights are always more impressive. Reaching super elite levels usually means gaining a lot of fat, with rare exceptions like Marvin Eder, who benched 500 pounds under 200 body weight back in the silver era. Outside of that, crossing the 500 pound barrier, which I know these numbers are insane, but that almost always means getting big and fat, like the legendary Doug Hepburn. Now for short guys like me, I'm 5'5", so even weighing 250 would be straight up obese, but my bench leverages would be insane. I already hit 405 at 181, so some ridiculously high body weight, 440 or maybe even 500, wouldn't be out of the question. I don't think so. For these reasons, you can't get mad at yourself for having a weaker bench press while cutting. It's normal, and I get it. It sucks. Most lifters are attached to their bench press, and watching your numbers fall is depressing. I hate it every time, but just know that as soon as you regain even a little bit of body fat, much of your leverages come back. That cushion returns, and mass moves mass. Same goes for squats. Most of the time, it only takes 2 to 3 months post-cut to regain around 90% of your former strength. And the first 5-10 pounds of weight that you gain back are often just water and glycogen, especially if you finish your cut with low carbs, which I don't recommend. I'll talk about that later. So if your weight bumps up and you've been watching your calories, don't panic. It's probably not fat. Think of a natural bodybuilder who's depleted, then carbs up during peak week and is suddenly 10 pounds heavier. That happens, but he's just as shredded, just fuller. And if you don't binge your way up, but instead take it slow, most of your strength comes back fairly quickly. You won't get back all the leverages, since some of that only comes with higher body weights, but a big chunk returns. Now I've got to emphasize again, the two lifts that take the biggest hit on a cut are the squat and bench. But if you step away from the powerlifting mindset for a bit, you'll notice that dumbbell pressing and fly strength don't drop nearly as much. Even after months of cutting, my incline dumbbell flies either stay the same or get better, yet my bench keeps dipping at the same time. Explain that. Same situation with dips. They're not as affected by leverage changes. There's no touch point after all. Yes, you lose some squish in the bottom with maybe less shoulder protection, but it's nothing like the bench press. And to prove my point, I've done 250 on the way to dip while bulked and 225 times 2 while shredded. Not a huge difference there. Whereas the bench press, it's closer to the 50 to 100 pound range. if I went from bulk to shredded. And honestly, dips might be better for hypertrophy anyway, because of the deeper stretch, which I'm always talking about in my videos and have for years. So it's motivating to know you'll probably maintain most of your dipping strength and other compounds that aren't just the bench press, which feels good compared to the bench where those minus ones keep piling up week after week. It's like you pray, am I going to maintain my strength this week? Only to get weaker, and you do your best. It is what it is, but of course, if you really love benching and refuse to take it out of your program or can't handle feeling weaker, one way to deal with the strength loss is to use supportive gear to mimic your bulked leverages. I'm talking about board presses, elbow wraps, or the slingshot, all of which can recreate that thickness and cushion they used to have. But just remember, even your slingshot max while shredded won't match your raw max while bulked. So don't base your entire upper body strength identity on the flat barbell bench press, and certainly not the big three, even though the deadlift will best maintain. It's the worst mistake you can make, and it'll absolutely kill your motivation to get lean. And regarding other exercises that are prone to strength loss, they usually feature tons of bracing. For example, switching from standing overhead press to the seated version can help minimize strength loss. So if you were pressing 200 at a body weight of 185, and now you cut to 160, that same bar is proportionally way heavier relative to your own body. It needs to coordinate around you, and it's well past 1 times body weight. Therefore, seated variations offer much greater stability. Your weight is irrelevant moving forward, and that applies to most seated braced exercises. Otherwise, favoring higher reps can also help mitigate this. Same thing goes for squats. I'd highly recommend switching to Hatfield squats or belt squats to reduce the bracing demand. If you don't have that, you can also do hack squats and pendulum squats at the gym. This avoids all the leverage changes. Plus, it gets a lot harder to tolerate axial loading when you're deep into a cut. I would even apply this to good mornings. So with smarter modifications like these, the leverages stay consistent, regardless of your body fat or how big you are. That makes these lifts excellent proxies for tracking actual leg strength retention. Personally, maintaining a 500-pound Hatfield squat for reps while in a deficit has been totally doable, and it's been my go-to benchmark for quads. And I'll say this too, machines become way more favorable when you're cutting. They require less stabilization and let you assess raw force output more directly. The last thing you want is to be limited by leverage changes that have nothing to do with your strength potential. Don't create external limiters. Seek to cut them out if your recovery and joint integrity are not in the best place. With that in mind, calisthenics is one of the few areas where strength might actually increase during a cut. You become more stable and efficient in bodyweight movements, especially on gymnastic rings. That's why shifting your focus to calisthenics can be psychologically beneficial. You will perform better thanks to improved leverages. That's why every time I cut, I unlock new personal records in weighted pull-ups, one-arm pull-ups, and ring work. Recently, I hit a lifetime PR with a 200-pound weighted pull-up and 185 on every grip except super wide. Losing body fat directly improves your pound-for-pound strength, making heavier external weights possible, and way more visually badass. It's cool when you have an extra plate hanging off your waist. Also, planche push-ups, front levers, handstand push-ups, triceps dips, muscle-ups, isolation work like pelican curls, and advanced calisthenics moves all benefit from this. That's why bulked-up calisthenics athletes rarely dominate in skill work. Extra mass only hurts your leverages. So if you've never trained skills or harder variations, this is literally the perfect opportunity. Just like how many calisthenics athletes avoid training legs to stay lighter, here, being 30 to 50 pounds down from your peak weight suddenly makes all the impossible progressions feel achievable. You'll be flying through space. Classic high rep calisthenics also becomes enjoyable again. It's easier on the joints and gives you new motivation and endurance-based goals. Unlocking new levels of bodyweight performance is an alternative to traditional strength standards that inevitably decline in a deficit. So after 6 major cuts, I know the reality. Bench press strength always drops. And these coaches who say otherwise, who act like you're doing something wrong if you lose strength, are wrong. They're trying to sell you a solution that doesn't exist. Like, how could the same program that got me to a 405 bench at 181 suddenly stop working just because I'm cutting? Was it really that bad? No, it's not a programming issue. It's leverages and depletion. Come on. It's so obvious. It's like they'll talk trash about bulking, saying, oh, it's just your leverages going up. But then when you lose the strength, they blame it on muscle loss. Talk about a contradiction. Guys, muscle loss eventually becomes unavoidable for everyone when you're doing a long-term cut. In all my years of doing this, I've never once grown into a show or seen that in strong, seasoned naturals. Maybe beginners or early intermediates can do it for a little bit, but advanced lifters, come on. You should absolutely expect strength loss every single time. The internet does not have some magical answer. If it existed, I promise I would have found it already. I'm obsessed with this lifestyle and I want to stay as jacked and strong as possible. But the truth is, you will lose strength. And that's okay. Don't fixate on your absolute strength numbers. Accept your new physique. You might go from elite to advanced. Maybe fall a bit below your peak, but you're still strong. So focus on pound for pound PRs instead, like maintaining a double body weight bench press. That's more realistic. So embrace why you're cutting in the first place, whether it's for health, aesthetics, etc. Then accept the trade-offs that come with it. You can't have it all, okay? Next, you'll want to monitor your isolation strength, which usually stays stable until you're super lean. During last year's cut, my curls actually improved from start to finish. And the same thing now. I'm preacher curling 60-pound dumbbells and barbell curling 135 for moderate reps with zero noticeable strength loss. I'm lifting the same weight on pushdowns and overhead extensions as well. No difference to when I bench 4 or 5, yet my close grip bench has dropped off significantly. So doesn't that discrepancy point to leverage changes, not muscle loss? So pay close attention to isolations like lateral raises instead of the overhead press, flies, curls, and triceps extensions, all of which can often improve deep into a deficit. These kinds of lifts are valuable psychological tools and reality checks. Seeing progression in some way helps preserve motivation. So if you're getting weaker at certain compounds, but the associated muscles on isolations are not getting weaker, then you know it's a leverage problem. Case closed. Your muscles are fine. On the flip side, if isolations start crashing too, and you're looking smaller and softer, then yes, your programming needs work. In that case, introducing new exercises can help mask perceived strength loss via neural adaptations. Don't worry about carryover. Just stick to the same structure, but rotate exercises more often. This not only reduces injury risk, but also keeps your cut fun and mentally fresh. Even short-term progression is enough to keep you locked in and motivated. You might also want to reintroduce the max effort method, or just include more top sets in the 4 to 6 rep range to maintain neural efficiency and the ability to strain. Right now, I'm doing this with heavy weighted pull-ups. Last year, I ran it on dips and pull-ups twice a week with 0 injuries. As long as you manage fatigue correctly, maxing out is perfectly safe, even in a deficit. Stop being fear-mongered by Reuters. If you cut out all heavy work entirely, your strength will drop even faster. Now, if you're fine with losing some maximal strength temporarily, which I doubt because you're watching this video, that's cool. Just don't make the mistake of ramping up the volume to make up for it. Your recovery is already worse on a cut, so less training is often better. Same goes for frequency. If you were hitting your muscles twice a week on a bulk, don't suddenly jump it to 3 times a week on a cut. You don't need more workouts to maintain muscle. If anything, it's the opposite. Fewer workouts equals better fatigue management. Personally, I like to cut back on volume slightly when cutting. Normally, I do 2 sets per exercise, but deep into a deficit, I'll drop some of those to 1. Sometimes, I even remove accessory lifts completely. For example, instead of doing 2 chest isolations, I'll just do 1, and it might just be 1 set. Or if I had 3 back movements, I'll reduce it to 2. Pull-ups and 1 chest supported row. That's it. You're not going to get that much bigger anyway during this phase. You're trying to hold onto the lean muscle you built from your bulk. Maybe improve a little bit when you can, but up to a certain point, it's not happening. As for splits, I'd strongly recommend against a 6-day push-pull legs routine when you're cutting. Or else, you're just pounding yourself into the ground, and by the end of the week, you'll feel wrecked. Do an upper-lower push-pull hybrid instead, or full body, or regular upper-lower, or a body part split with some overlapping muscles. I'd recommend lifting no more than 4 to 5 days a week, especially in the final stretch of your cut. It helps with joint pain and makes recovery way more manageable as your body fat and energy stores hit their lowest point. And lastly, consider cutting back on high intensity cardio, particularly during the final 10 pounds of your cut. Once you're lean, injury risk skyrockets, and high impact workouts like sprints or daily burpees can absolutely wreck your shoulders, knees, or elbows. I recently did daily burpees for over a month on top of hardcore bodybuilding training, and I immediately ran into shoulder overuse. I had to deload right away because if I didn't listen to my body, I 100% would have gotten injured. Contrary to popular belief, overuse injuries from high intensity cardio are more common than injuries from heavy lifting, and that's probably due to the explosive peak forces in addition to the repetitive motion. Just saying. I maxed out every single week on the bench press for months with 0 issues. But 1 month of daily burpees? That trashed my shoulders like nothing else. So instead, go with low intensity cardio like incline walking. That's what all the bodybuilders do, and for good reason. Now, on days where you're feeling good, you can include some light jogging or cycling, but keep the intensity manageable. Don't kill yourself with this stuff. And by the way, I highly recommend getting a walking pad and sticking it under your desk. Set it to around 4.5 miles per hour and walk for an hour or more each day. You can easily push that up to 15,000 or even 20,000 steps a day. Time flies, and you can watch all your favorite fitness videos just like this while doing it. You won't feel as tired or generate much systemic fatigue. This won't hurt your workouts. So this jacks up your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, your NEAT, which lets you eat more while still losing fat. You go from sedentary to super active, even if you work a desk job or drive around everywhere. So instead of needing to consume, say, 1,800 calories to get shredded, you might now be able to eat 2,100 calories and still lose the same amount of body fat just from moving more. That also means you can fit in more carbs, feel better, and train harder. That's very important. And on that note, don't restrict carbs too much unless you absolutely have to. This is one of the biggest cutting mistakes. Dropping carbs below 200 grams a day crushes your energy, kills your work capacity, and makes it way harder to feel full or satisfied. Stick to foods like potatoes, oats, rice, beans, berries, and mixed vegetables. These starches and fibers help with satiety and keep performance high. Go for foods high in water content so you can eat more and stay full. Also very important, reduce dietary fat. Your body already has plenty of fat stores to burn. This only really matters if you're shredded. And please, stop stressing about your hormones unless you're shredded. Do you understand the message? Unless you're shredded, all these cons that people talk about are so much less applicable to you. Unless you're shredded. I keep having to repeat that. So, calorie-dense fats like oils, nuts, and extra fat from protein sources, cut those down as much as you can. If you do that, cutting becomes a joke. So carbs should ideally make up 70% or more of your total intake, with protein just high enough to preserve lean tissue. For me at 160, 120 grams of protein is more than enough. I've tested this many times, which falls right around that 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight mark. Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. I question some of the research saying you need higher protein. I tend to fall in line with the guidelines of Menno Henselmans on this one, because that's what my experience has shown to be correct as well. So stop falling for protein marketing hype. You need way less than you think. And most importantly, don't base your protein needs on your bulked body weight. Base it on your lean body weight. Lean mass, okay? One more point. When your work capacity drops to where you're struggling to finish your workouts, or sometimes you can't even finish them at all, that's when muscle loss really starts to ramp up. That's the red flag telling you it's time to stop cutting. But the good news, it's all temporary. Once you return to a maintenance or small surplus, work capacity and strength quickly rebounds. Focus on pound for pound strength through calisthenics, isolation exercise, and new stable exercises. Even when your compounds take a hit, these alternatives give you consistent signs of progress and help keep your head in the game. Avoid fad diets and slow your cut down as you get leaner. At first, dropping up to 2 pounds per week is fine. It won't cost you much muscle. But at the last 1 to 2 months, that part should be slower. Don't do extreme carb cuts unless you're prepping for a competition or photo shoot. They're not needed for general fat loss. Certainly not to be 12% body fat. For most lifters who aren't trying to get competition shredded, hardcore carb restriction is not the best idea. And I promise you'll feel like garbage. Don't make your cut harder than it needs to be. Emphasize the positives of cutting. Better aesthetics, improved health, and enhanced relative strength. You haven't lost everything. You just experienced normal reductions in weight-dependent compounds due to altered leverages and depletion. And even after all that dieting, ask yourself, are your strength numbers at this new body fat still higher than the previous cut? Do you weigh the same but look leaner? Or are you leaner at the same weight? Have your muscle measurements improved compared to previous phases? These are the metrics that matter most, not your 1-rep maxes. These reflect real long-term muscle gains, not just temporary leverage shifts. If you had 15-inch arms, a single-digit body fat before, and now they're 16 inches at the same level of leanness, that's a massive muscular improvement. Great job. Who cares if your close grip bench press went down in strength? Your arm training clearly worked, especially if your isolation lifts stayed stable or even improved, which they very well might. So appreciate and prioritize the lifts that continue progressing or holding steady. Once your cut is done, you will neurologically readapt and regain some of those lost leverages just by eating more. Sometimes you'll even beat your old numbers thanks to a supercompensation effect, except now you're lighter. So look at the big picture. This is how you dramatically reduce the mental and physical stress of getting weaker. Embrace the entire process and think about how good you're going to look and feel by the end of this. Trust the proven cycle of bulking and cutting. It works. With the strategies I've laid out, you'll finish this cut with a better mindset and be fully ready to regain or even surpass your old PRs once you return to a maintenance or slight caloric surplus. So I hope this eased off your worries, and if you've been through this before and have other tips to share, drop them in the comments section, and I'll talk to you guys next time.